So before we talk about WebSockets, of course we gotta talk about some online-only mode. So I made the Piazza post if you didn't see it, kind of talking about how that's going to affect our class. Honestly, not too much is affected for us. I already stream, you can already watch the lectures online. Office hours will go to mostly Piazza. We'll have office hours there. I'll also have some Twitch office hours, but we have to go to Piazza if we have specific questions. If you have any questions about your grades, for example, we can't share those on Twitch, of course. That sounds obvious when I say it out loud, because Twitch is to everybody. But Twitch also isn't FERPA compliant, that we can't guarantee that they're going to protect your records. Piazza is, so anything where we're talking about grades has to be on Piazza, email, or any other sanctioned UB platform. That said, lecture content, Twitch is going to be our main avenue for that. Twitch and YouTube, same as usual. And as we're moving to utilize those platforms more, just be careful about your records. Don't talk about anything related to your academic record on those platforms. Keep your privacy private, because you don't know who's watching on Twitch. I mean, that's just general advice anyway. You don't want to leak information about anything about you. But specifically for FERPA, that's the domain I really have to be concerned about, is any course enrollment information, other courses you're taking, enrolled in, grades, of course. That said, you're in control of your records, so it's not a violation if you share it, but just be careful, just as a word of advice. Don't share that information. Piazza, if you have to talk about grades, if you have to talk about your code, same as usual, make a private post to instructors, and we'll take care of it there. And I'll have more announcements and more details that I'll share. Any major announcements I'll make over email, so I'll probably have one big email during spring break when I have all the structure of what we're going to do figured out. And then Piazza, of course, that'll be my main tool for announcements, besides big infrastructure announcements that I'll make over email. So keep an eye out for those for more specific details. For example, and to be honest, I kind of see this as an opportunity. I'm kind of excited about this, if I can say that. There are certain restrictions that we have when we have live courses. For example, we have to have lectures 10 to 10:50 Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Well, that restriction is kind of blown away, because the only reason we have that is because I have to share these classrooms with hundreds of other courses. We don't have that restriction anymore. Schedule can be blown wide open. We can start having more flexibility with that. And I'll work with the class, I'll work with everybody to see what works best and have better structured lecture, I think, is something we'll be able to gain from this. For example, this week is all about WebSockets. So I have everything I want to talk about WebSockets. And then I have to take all that content and chop it into 3 50-minute chunks and then deliver those 50-minute chunks separated by several days. I don't think that's the best way to learn the content, but that's what we have to do with this structure. So there are some things I'll work over spring break to figure out a new structure and figure out what's going to work. Worst case, the default, I'll just stream 10 to 10:50 Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But I think there's an opportunity to do something that's going to be more effective for that. I also might make some changes to the grading. I'm hesitant to even do this. I'll think it over spring break, and if you have feedback, let me know. I might have some way to measure attendance to some degree, just to make sure that you're keeping up on the material. If this is a concern across campus, of course, a lot of professors are going to be pre-recording videos and then just posting them on a site and hoping that students watch them. And I mean, they're not. I was a student before. Whenever I had that, I would wait until the next exam and then I'd watch all the videos the night before. I know that's how it works. It's just what we do. I never wanted to do that, and I hear from a lot of students that they don't want to do that. They would like to keep up on the material, but when nothing's pushing you, it's just natural to not do something that's not really urgent. So I might have something, have some form of polls or something during lecture. One, to get some more interaction in the lecture, but also just to give you a push to get you to show up to the live stream instead of waiting for the VOD later. Once your schedules blow up and you're not, okay, I wake up, I come to CSE 312 at 10, then I go to my other class. You know, you have a schedule, you have a routine. It's kind of easy to get in that flow. Once that's blown apart, you just have a pile of videos to watch. I'm concerned that it's going to be really easy for everybody to just put school off to the side and just do whatever else you want to do. So I want something to push you. If you like that idea, definitely let me know, and it'll push me to implement something. Maybe we'll have trying to think of the best way to do it. Probably, just off the top of my head, maybe Piazza polls that I open during lecture, and then you can respond to the poll to get some interaction. I need a way to do it on a FERPA compliant platform if I'm going to do that kind of interaction. So that's stuff that I can think about and figure out. But give me feedback as to whether you want something like that or not.
Just out of curiosity, if an in-person course is too restrictive to the material of this course, could you in the future maybe move to just online course for 312?
What do you mean by another course being restrictive?
No, but an on-campus course, is that how you're restricted to 315,
Oh,
50,
yes.
Could you like move it to online only to expand?
So this is something I'm, honestly, another thing I'm excited for. I've asked for that. I didn't push too hard, but I bounced off Chunming a few times. Could we have, because we have these massive classes and just finding rooms and stuff is already an issue. This course is at least somewhat, I wanted to keep the class size small because it's a first run, the first large run. But this room is capped at 100. We have the fire code that says 100 max for this room. So, and we wanted to go up to like 110 or 120, but we couldn't do it. Like, there are actual physical restrictions all over the place for us. So I bounced it off them before, like, can't we just have some sections? It was in the context of 115 at the time. Can we have some sections of 115, maybe one live section in a small room like this for anybody who wants to show up, and then the rest online? It got shot down. I didn't push too hard to really figure out what the reason was for that. But the reason I'm excited is now that we all have to build an online infrastructure for our courses, when we come back in the fall, I think there's going to be a lot of technology that can carry over. That since we're forced to do this now, campus-wide, we're going to have a lot more opportunities in the fall since we have that infrastructure already there. We're already used to that. And then in the fall, when I'm like, hey, can I do 116 mostly online and just have one small live section, I think it's going to go over a lot better. So yes, that's something I absolutely want to do. The one big sticking point is the one I already mentioned is measuring attendance, but I think I can do that with live streaming because whenever that's brought up in the past, nobody, including myself, brought up live streaming. I wasn't streaming at the time. It was just going to be recorded videos, and how do you get a student to watch a recorded video? That's a challenge. There are ways that have been implemented in the past. We tried it in 199. I say we, but one of our faculty members tried it in 199, the first iteration of that. It just doesn't work. It doesn't at all. He embedded the YouTube videos into his course website and then wrote a bunch of JavaScript to make sure that they actually watched the video, actually watched the progress of them watching the video and made sure they watched it, and even restricted this. This is where I really disagreed. Actually restricted that they had to watch it at 1x speed, and had all this JavaScript to try to monitor that. None of it worked. They still didn't watch the videos. They would. He also had code to make sure that that tab was active. All this other code. But what students did was fire up a VM, put the video in the VM, and then do whatever they want outside of that, with the volume muted, of course. So they didn't watch the videos, but according to his JavaScript, it looked like they watched the videos. Plus, it was all front-end JavaScript, so they could just send yep, I watched this video, whatever his API looked like. So we can build stuff, but I think that's just a losing battle. But if it's live and I have a poll like, hey, respond to this poll, similar to Top Hat, but I'm not going to use Top Hat. But like here's some poll, let's interact through this poll. And then anybody who didn't interact with that poll, I could be like, hey, you didn't watch the live stream, what's going on here? But as far as details, I'll come up with something over spring break. We'll talk about it. The one thing that is affected by this in our course is the video presentation, but the presentation, what should be live presentations. I'll probably move those to video presentations. We'll lose some of the effect of that. I wanted you all to get practice presenting in front of an audience. I could look at ways where you can live stream it. I don't know if that'll be really worth it, so I might just have you make that last video be a presentation length in style video for your phase 3. So we might lose a little bit of that, but that was more of a want of mine. I want you getting that practice in any 300 and 400 level CSE class, especially with the project attached. I think it's a good opportunity to get you practice presenting, but it's not really part of the course content. The course is about building the web app, so we might lose that one, but it's all we can do. Everything else is business as usual. I stream the lectures. You can submit homeworks online. There's no recitations. The meetings, the team meetings, I'll leave that up to whatever solution you think is best. I could throw out suggestions, but they're probably going to be stuff that you already know about. Voice chat on Discord. WebEx. I don't know if you have access to the UB's WebEx. Communicating on Piazza. I might have to set up Piazza groups now that I think about it. But I can set up Piazza groups so you can talk within your team on Piazza to give you an avenue where you could talk about FERPA protected things. So if you want to talk about the grade that I just gave you, you'd have to do that on Piazza. I should offer something. I have to give you a way to talk about that. Yes.
Question. Let's say we have something that we want us on Piazza about our project. Is there a way to tag our entire group instead of just doing
That's what I'm talking about. You can't right now, but if I set up the Piazza teams, I can create a group for each, a Piazza group for each team, and then you can do exactly that. That's something I got to look into about how exactly that works. I tried it with 442 one semester. I set it up, and I remember it being a complete pain in the ass. The biggest, if I recall, the biggest issue was when somebody switched groups, which for some reason I was allowing that semester. There's no good way to do that, but we don't have that issue in this course, so it might be much painless than I remember. Any other questions? Chat, in chat, feel free to chime in and ask your questions. The lecture interaction is going to be Twitch chat moving forward, so anybody out there listening, those 14 of you, feel free to take advantage of chat so we can all get used to that protocol. This will be, of course, the last live lecture. I'm not going to come to campus for probably a few months, so I'm going to respect the spirit of what we're doing as much as I can and not even come in for meetings or anything. So Twitch chat is going to be our main communication through lecture. And then Piazza when we need to talk about the course. I was getting my, hi stick figure. And I met with Nick yesterday. It was our regular meeting, but of course we just talked about distance learning stuff. And during that meeting, I went through Piazza, cleaned up the old Piazza posts, since I'll be spending a lot more time there. I've mostly been leaving that to Nick, and then I was answering things in office hours. But I'll step up my Piazza game and be much, much more active on Piazza moving forward, since that'll be my main means of communication while I'm not streaming. All right, any other concerns about this? How are the other classes going? Have you heard announcements from your other? Just questions? It's a lot of discussion I'm hearing from them.
Some already, like one of my professors are already trying out Zoom for the statistics lecture, so I guess it works.
I have to look at Zoom. I haven't looked at that one yet. I mean, I don't plan on switching, but I'd like to see
a
that.
professor who doesn't know how to use technology and like what we're going to do about that. It's going to be the nightmare.
That always cracks it. For some reason, it's always the communications department that communicates so ineffectively. I don't understand that. We needed their help. We were proposing the redesign for our curriculum. We had to reach out to any department with a course similar to any of ours to see if we were duplicating any courses. So we needed some communication, plus changing prereqs and changing our courses. If they're using, they were using CSE 113 and 115 as a prereq, as one of their requirements at the time. And they were the one department that just wouldn't respond to any emails and absolutely not communicate at all. I don't know. It's just anecdotal evidence, but geez, they seem to not be communicating very well. Communications professors, if you're listening out there, step up your game, please. Professor Hunt is following your approach and moving to Twitch for HCI. Hell yeah. Twitch, the one concern, the behind-the-scenes conversation that we're having with Twitch is the FERPA compliance thing. Twitch is not FERPA compliant. I've been digging into FERPA and seeing what FERPA compliance even means, and it doesn't really mean anything, I found out from everything I'm saying. Seeing FERPA compliance, for Piazza to be FERPA compliant, that just means they're saying, hey, you can trust us, we're cool, we're FERPA compliant. And what that means is basically their word that they're going to not share your enrollment information. Piazza has your enrollment information. We upload the roster. That's protected, FERPA protected information. So what they're saying is, don't worry, we're not going to tell anybody else about this roster. And there are laws in place that allows them to do that, as long as they agree not to share that stuff. But you don't have to like apply for FERPA compliance. There's no review committee that takes a look at anything. I like to think that there are, but in the law, it doesn't say anything. There's no governing body or anything. So I'm happy to see someone else moving to Twitch. And Ethan is looking into Twitch as well for 220. I don't know, don't have a verdict on what he's doing yet, but he said he's looking into it. We have WebEx, that's our standard, like the university says, use WebEx. And then at least the school, I don't know if this came from the university, said don't use WebEx because it's so shitty that it can't handle everybody streaming at once, which frustrates the hell out of me. Why do you offer this tool that sucks so bad that you're going to tell us not to use it when we absolutely need it? Like we need a solution like that. So we're actually being told not to stream, and I'm like, you know, Twitch exists, and it doesn't suck and can handle much, much more load than we're going to give it. But anyway, maybe they'll get it together. But the one big thing that does push back, Twitch isn't FERPA compliant. Now I have to argue this battle. Well, what is FERPA compliance? What is FERPA? Can you define those for me? And most likely they can't. So I just need those people to actually look into FERPA is what I think. As long as we're not sharing student records. So like Piazza is an issue because the first thing I do when I create a Piazza course is upload that roster. So I'm explicitly sharing that information with them. With Twitch, I never shared a roster. I never shared, upload a gradebook to Twitch or anything. So that's the concern. If we wanted a private stream only to the class, that would be a FERPA violation because then they can see that we're sharing it with these specific people. Now they have enrollment information. As long as it's public on Twitch, I don't see a FERPA violation in anything of what we're doing. So if somebody does come after me on that one, I'm going to push back pretty hard and say, look, this is legit. We're not sharing any student records. But that is the concern. That's why you're not seeing everybody just flock over to Twitch. That's what the conversation that's going on behind the scenes. Looks like, I think the suggested approach right now is to record with Panocto, upload the videos, and then have, separate from the video, some live chat interaction, which, because of the bandwidth issue, which is just ridiculous. Because WebEx can't handle the bandwidth. That one frustrates me to no end. But then having some just chat so you can have that dialogue with students without streaming video attached to it. And they're looking into platforms that can handle that. But the big thing is with our class sizes, we can't really handle that. Too many students all at once. I haven't heard of a FERPA compliant service that will handle all those students, which, I don't know. I gotta talk to the people raising the FERPA issues because it doesn't make sense. I suppose, oh no, it does make sense. Because if you have it private, okay, only these people, yeah, it is that issue. Yeah, you do have that issue. But if it's public, I don't see an issue. But I can see public getting pushed back on that. I can see some people having issues with Twitch because people from outside the class can be in the Twitch chat, which I'm fine with, to be honest. But if more people want to learn, I'm not doing this. Yes.
Like, you just possibly one of the easiest campuses to get on, so like, technically someone can come into any class and no one would notice that they were in
Yes,
class.
agreed. We should ban live lectures then, because anybody could come in. Check ID at the doors. Yeah, there have probably been squatters in my classes all the time, but I've never noticed. In a course like this, maybe. Especially with attendance like this, I would start to notice, but yeah, I would never know. And honestly, I wouldn't care. I've had students ask if they can sit out in my classes. I always say yes. I don't care. If somebody else wants to learn without having to pay a bunch of money, I'm not going to complain. Which, if we want to go down this road, what are you actually paying for? Do we want to go down this road? I feel like we already started, so let's go down a little more. Because I think about this a lot. What are you actually paying for? Especially, I release everything online. You can consume all the content I produce for my courses all online. And you can do the same thing with, you can get MIT courses. You can go to MIT OpenCourseWare. You can watch this content delivered from an MIT professor. You can do Harvard online courses and many others. Stanford, I think, has a bunch of online courses now. You can consume this content for free anyway. Especially when it comes to like 115 and 116. You have so many options online and so many people that you can listen to this content for free who can probably explain it better than I'm going to. So what are you paying for? And what I come down to is the assessment is the biggest one. I'm one pushing you to actually do the course, because if you just sign up, how many of us, I've done it, sign up for a free online course and then just do nothing, maybe watch the first lecture, and then do absolutely none of the work. So you have somebody pushing you, hey, there's a deadline, do this thing, and then it actually gets you to do it. And then the assessment, okay, you did this thing, let me put my stamp on it and say, yes, you actually did go through this, you went through the pain and suffering, you completed this assignment, here's a number, and then at the end of the semester, here's a letter, here's how you actually did. And it goes on an official transcript, and you can show other people, hey, I did this thing. That's something you don't really get with the free online courses, which they can't really do on the free online courses because they have to monitor cheating somehow. And if they're doing that, they're probably not going to be free, because that would be very expensive to be able to monitor all that. And of course, the degree they would need to be able to get a job.
It seems like there's a trend out there, I don't know if it's a real thing or just people trying to spread this, that make money off this stuff, like, they say like, oh, these online courses are so valuable, like, go to Udemy, like, you know, these are IBM courses or whatever, like, is that just them trying to push their own products, or is there really, do companies really care about that? It seems like nobody.
I mean, I'm not going to speculate their motive, but I would guess. Yeah, I'm not going to attribute motive, but there is a lot of value in that. Like, if you can go to a Udemy course and learn so much stuff. I mean, there is a lot of value out there. But I think it's.
Personal value, can you put that on a resume?
Oh yeah, if you take a Udemy course, put that on your resume. Absolutely. Especially in computer science, employers don't even care if you have a degree. To be honest, if you know the stuff and you can code, that's why the interviews are those. You have those technical interviews, even if they're not asking technical questions like the Google style, which like the top 5 biggest companies, they'll have that style. But all the other companies, they'll still have a technical interview, basically where they just sit down with you and just start talking tech with you. If you can make sense and show that you know what you're talking about, they don't really need to see that degree. If I were hiring tech people and I saw a resume that says, I didn't go to school one day, but here's all the online courses that I took, and here's a project, here's like 5 projects that I built. You can go to the GitHub links and check them out. I would call that person in for an interview, like no question. I think, in a sense, that might even weigh more than a degree. There are a lot of people who get degrees, at least here I see it, get degrees, but all they did was go through the motions of each class, and they can graduate without really knowing all that much. They just were able to get through each homework assignment, get through each exam. So if somebody showed that self-starting, motivated, I like programming and I just went out and programmed, that would be great for me. So yeah, absolutely put those courses on your resume. Courses and any project you did outside of a class, that's one of the biggest things that employers look for in this industry. Did you do something outside of a class? Because that shows that you can really take an idea and just turn it into software, which is what they want to hire you to do. They want to talk about, the executives, they want to talk about ideas. Here's what I want to do, and then your job is to turn that into software. Show that you can do that without someone holding your hand and forcing you to do it. Absolutely weighs a lot. That's why I think besides the degree that you get, that you're paying for that, I don't think that's all. In my opinion, I should preface all this. This is all my opinion. Don't take these as absolutes. But I think that degree is a little less on the value side that you're paying for. I think the biggest thing is having me and my colleagues push you and say, look, here's an assignment, do it by this time, or there are going to be consequences. I think that's the biggest thing that you pay for. Because without that, how many, when I look at the deadlines, like almost, at least 90% of the work gets done for any given assignment on the day of the deadline. It's a little less of a problem in 312, because you're more mature, you understand that these assignments do take a long time, and you're getting started early for the most part. In 116, that's certainly not the case when I look at those deadlines. So it is that deadline that's getting you to really do that stuff. If I just went through the lecture went through the whole course with no deadlines, most students just wouldn't learn the content. I think that's the number one thing that you're paying for. In my opinion, feel free to disagree. I would love to hear other opinions on that. Because it might be a controversial opinion. I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion or not. On the surface, I'm sure it'd be really unpopular, but with my explanation, I don't know, it makes sense to me. Okay, we should talk about WebSockets. Any last stuff on this? This is the last time we'll see each other in person, so let's enjoy it. Let's take it in. It's looking like no. For this class, we don't have a final exam anyway, so we're pretty good. But it looks like finals week is also wiped out. There's always the possibility that the hysteria kind of washes over and we get a reversal of the decision and we come back for a week or two. It's possible, but everything that we're seeing right now is indicating that that won't happen. So it's only if there's a big change in current events. It looks like finals week is out the water. We won't see each other in person until fall. Yeah.
Just a question. Are you going to review the course grades overall just to see how the class is performing during break?
Yeah. So this is. You sound like you were in that meeting with me, Mike. So Mike and I have been talking about this for a while. So I might as well talk about this a little now. I was going to wait till after spring break and make when I have all my announcements ready. But over spring break, I'm going to assess how the whole class is doing as a whole, look at all the grades, and make some decisions about grading. I don't curve my classes, so the cutoffs, those are what they're going to be. But I left a lot undefined intentionally in the grading structure. So your homework assignments, you have 3 objectives graded 0 to 3, but how does that translate into a score out of 100%? I left that completely undefined, so that's kind of my makeshift way of having a curve. I'll look at how the class is doing and how do 0 through 3 map to 0 to 100%. That I'm going to decide over spring break, depending on how the class is doing. I'll look at project phase 1. The project, I really left that undefined. At least the homework, you can map that to a score 0 to 12. And the default would just be scaling that to 0 to 100. So you could kind of guess what that might have looked like if you didn't know what I'm saying right now. But the project, there's nothing even remotely like that. How do I get a 0 to 100 score on a project? So I look at how the course is doing, make those decisions, and that'll kind of be my makeshift curve, is deciding those magnets. because 92 for an A, 70 especially for the F, those are a little strict. So I knew those when I wrote them up. But I also knew that I was going to do something like this. Especially, yeah. So, for example, just to put the exclamation point on that one, if I did the standard mapping and a 70, less than a 70 is an F, well, if you got 2s on every single objective, well, that's a 66 and you failed. I'm not going that strict. I'm not going to map it directly like that. That would be, I mean, I'm harsh in times, but I'm not nearly that harsh. You got close on absolutely everything. Fail. No, not happening. All right, let's talk about some WebSockets. All right, so last time we talked about the format of a... Yeah, random 0, or is that an O? Random username. Absolutely. So this is the other side of my decision on that. If I have some way of measuring attendance, if I'm measuring attendance in some way, the other side of that is, well, I have weekly homeworks, and you really need the lecture content to do the homework anyway. So the homeworks themselves are that forcing function to be able to get you to watch the lecture. That's what I've been banking on so far with the live lectures, because attendance has been pretty low. Even when I sum everyone who was live plus everyone on Twitch, it was still pretty low. So, and I've been banking on that the homeworks are the forcing function. So I might just stick with that. But I don't know. I've also had students in office hours, this is something I've been wondering anyway, I've had students in office hours asking questions that are so blatantly explained multiple times in lecture. I think there are already students who are not attending lecture and just trying to dive into the homework. So regardless of this online only, this is something I've been thinking about. But by default, I will just leave it the way it is and leave the homeworks to be the forcing function. And since since office hours will be online, I could just have my time codes ready. If somebody asks a question that was answered in lecture, here's the time code. Or here's the post where I made the time codes for the lecture or something like that. I don't know. There's a lot of different things we can do now it's online only. I'll have a little bit more time in my day. I drive on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I drive to campus twice. I spend like an hour just commuting. So that's already 3 hours of my week that I gain. Yeah.
I really like the time code idea, just because it would save a lot of time on something that I guess for some reason you have and skipping over it 3 times.
Yeah.
That would actually be very useful.
Okay, I'll bump that up my priority list then. Doing the time codes. Yeah, we can do that. Maybe when we post them on YouTube, do the comment with the time codes. Seems to be the thing to do. We can do that. I see why we can't. Looks like I can organize the lectures better as well. Excuse me. So the lectures might be more suited to time codes, because right now the concepts are somewhat mixed together. But I could separate it like here's exactly where I talk about the length of a WebSocket frame. And then just confine myself. Yeah, there's things we can do. That I don't have to talk about that right now. We're still under the old style of I have this 50-minute block of time. So let's use this 50 minutes and talk about the rest of this. So we talked about the structure of a packet. We talked about how to extract how to extract the length of a frame, how to extract that mask, and how to use that mask on all the bytes of the data coming in. And we saw this quick example of XOR. I want to go over this quickly again just because I want to show a manual example of doing this and show exactly that this is doing what we expect it to do. But if we want to send this message, the user wants to send these 4 bytes as the message. They're going to generate this random mask and XOR these 2 byte strings together to get this byte. And this is what's going to be sent in the payload of that frame. So if we try to read this and decode this, it's not going to decode to anything. I mean, it might, but it'll just be random stuff. Since these all start with 0, it looks like this will be valid ASCII, actually. But this is what's going to be sent. And then when we receive this, we read the mask and we read the payload and then XOR the mask with each 4 bytes of the payload to get the original message back. So this, which is this, XORed with the mask twice. Well, if you XOR the mask twice, that's going to zero everything out and we're back to the original message. So we get the original message by demasking that value. So we do that for each 4 bytes of the payload. If we have a number of bytes that's not a multiple of 4, you have to be aware of how to handle those last few bytes. You have to make sure that they handle those appropriately. If you have 2 extra bytes at the end, you take just the first 2 bytes of the mask and XOR them. If we send a frame, I don't have too much to talk about with sending the frames because we send it in the same exact format. There's no difference in the format. Like with HTTP request and response, we have the request line, which is different than the status line. So we have some differences in how to send those back. Otherwise, HTTP is the same for request and response too. With WebSockets, it's the exact same. We have this full duplex messaging, so there's no difference between a message from server to client and client to server. It's just the same format, same style, same protocol. There's no special thing that says this is the server. There's no special thing that says this is the client. It's just 2 ends of the same WebSocket. So we have the same exact format. We just have to build this the other way. We have to build these bits. The mask is going to be 0 though. We're not going to use a mask. And then this mask is just not here. So we set these bits, except the mask is 0. And then if our payload length is less than 126, we use the 7 bits. If it's more than that, we might use the 16 or the 64 bits. But whatever we use for the length, right after the length is specified, that's when our payload starts. We don't have the mask here, so we jump right to the payload after we're done encoding the length. And there's a shortcut you can use for your homework here, which I was contemplating whether to encourage this or not. But you're going to get, I do it in my example, I feel obligated to talk about it. You're going to get these first two, 4, or 10 bytes from the client. And if all you're doing is broadcasting that client's message to all users, which is what you have to do in homework 4, if that's all you're doing, that header, all that meta information is going to be exactly the same, except the mask bit is 0. So if you pull those bytes from the client's message, 0 out the mask bit is the only work you really have to do, and then append the message to the end of it. That's a perfectly formatted, valid message that you want to send, that you want to broadcast to all clients. So just 0 out this mask and append the demasked payload data. We're just sending plain text. I just thought of this, but if you really want to cheese it, you could just send it back with the masked. I wouldn't be too mad if you did that. You could just send the whole frame back. I'd rather you not do that because you won't understand as much about WebSockets, but you could send it with the same mask, couldn't you? Anyway. But yeah, we usually don't use a mask when we're sending client to server. There's no need, we don't have to avoid the caching, we don't have to trick any caching. Client's not going to cache, not in that way anyway. So there's no need to do that. Yeah.
Doesn't it have to have a little bit of cackling onto it? That's not the way it works. That's where we add that part on how the client can confirm that we received it. So it is going to be a little bit longer.
What part do you mean?
There was something where we had to concat onto the end of those, right? There was like a specific string of characters that we had to add.
That was in the HTTP part, that was part of the handshake. So whenever we're sending these frames, that's after that handshake already happened. So when we get the first HTTP request that says, let's upgrade to WebSockets, we're going to have that key, we're going to read that, append that string to the end, hash it, and then base 64 encode that, and then send that back in the HTTP header of the response. But once that handshake is done, anything else that happens on that TCP connection is going to be these frames. So we're already done with that part by the time we get our first frame. So there's 2 different sides to this. Establishing that connection, that was HTTP. After that, we're speaking strictly in the frames. Then we have our simplifying assumptions here, some of them. This is something you can use as a kind of a sanity check just to make sure you're reading this information the way it's supposed to be read. If you take this first byte, these first 8 bits, this 1 byte, it's always going to be this for the purpose of our homework. It won't actually always be that, but you can assume that it's always going to be that. For the homework, if you don't handle other message types, you can still get full credit for the homework. So if this first byte is exactly 129, you know you're at least off the ground. You have this thing at least started to make sense. All right. Let's see some of the good stuff here. Whoa, I don't want OBS. So let's look at some code. So I have my web server running. And I have my app up in 2 separate windows. And we refresh these just to make sure. Actually, let me open up the consoles. And we want to see this socket request. Make this bigger. So we have this request for /socket. For /socket, we're going to get this WebSocket key, which actually is base64 encoded, but it doesn't really affect us, affect our purposes here. We have this key, and my server has to generate this accept with that, with what we were doing last time. So in my server, when I'm handling one of these requests to upgrade the connection, we get this /socket, we see all the headers that we saw in the browser, and we have to send back, oh my goodness, where is it? Oh, this is the next, I'm not printing out my responses, that's why. So I have to compute this thing. I'm going to have this key, and again, for your, when we get to phase 2, you're using WebSockets, you're pulling in some library for your WebSockets. I'm going to want to see that key. That key is going to be somewhere in the library that you use. So in that report, whatever link you have, if it doesn't have that key, you know you're doing something wrong. Which can also help that you search the library, click the root directory of that library, and search for this exact string. It's going to take you right to the socket, the WebSocket code that handles the upgrade request. So I have this key. I'm going to append that to the end of my I have that GUI, that string, this globally unique ID. But I have my key that extracted from the headers. I'm going to append it to that GUI. I'm saying GUI again. It doesn't matter. Convert that to bytes because the hash algorithm is going to work in bytes. When you pull in your SHA-1 hashing, it's probably not going to hash strings. It might, depending on library, depending on language, and all that good stuff. But it might not handle strings. We have to convert this to bytes, and then get our hash function. However your language does this. I checked this for Python and JavaScript. It's about as straightforward as this, if not a little bit more straightforward in those languages. But search SHA-1, how do I do this in my language? And you can get something like this that's going to tell you how to do that hashing. I get the hash function. I'm going to create a hash of my value, and then pull in some base64 encoder to be able to encode that in base 64. You have to have these steps, and once you have these steps, you should have that correct response. To check this to help your debugging, what I would do is find some site on the internet. Twitch chat is one of them if you want a default option. And look at the upgrade request. Look at that request that got the 101 response. Take a look at the headers and make sure, and use that header, that key as your test case. Take that response and use that as the expected value of your test case. Write some method like this, and then you can do your testing without going online and checking if the connection worked properly and everything. That'd be a real pain in the ass to debug. But if you're writing a method like this, take a test case from a live server out there. They all have to compute these in the exact same way. So use that as a test case so you can get this computed properly to make sure you have the exact right values in the right places and have really quick debugging time, really quick process time on that. So once you have that, so I'm sending back that response, we're establishing a connection, and then once I get a request, and this is going to be depending on your language and depending on your structure of your setup. Might be tricky, might not be, but once we have that TCP socket upgraded to a WebSocket connection, we have to remember that that specific TCP socket connection is a WebSocket connection. So I'm taking this in my library. I have access to sender, which is a reference to that socket that I'm connected to. I'm going to take that and put it in a data structure to remember that that is a WebSocket connection. Any other bytes coming over that TCP connection need to be handled as WebSocket frames. If I try to handle those as HTTP requests, everything's just going to crash and blow up. So I have to make sure any future communication on this TCP connection is going to be a WebSocket. So I'm saying every time I receive data, I'm going to say, is the sender a WebSocket? If it is, handle as a WebSocket message, else handle as an HTTP request. So we have to be careful about this. And plus, we need to remember all of the users who are connected with WebSockets, because when you're on that objective 4 and I get a message from a user, I need to broadcast that to every single user. So I have to send a frame with that message to every user that's connected with WebSockets. If I don't have a reference to every socket that's a WebSocket, how do I do that? Yes?
Does that also mean we have to get rid of that port, or we have to make sure that the user is still connected, or like as soon as the user disconnects?
No, so you don't have to keep track of the users still connected. You would in practice. You're going live with the server? Absolutely you do. For this homework assignment, I'm not going to check that. I need to manage the complexity a little bit on this one. WebSockets could get a little bit out of hand if you're implementing every detail about the protocol. So that's one of the simplifying things that I'll have. So we can assume the opcode is always 1. It's always a text message. If we had an opcode of 8, for example, you'll see those from time to time, where it's closing the connection. An opcode of 8100, that's going to be closed connection. If you don't handle those, that's fine. So I'm keeping track of those. I'm out of time, so let's just quickly show the functionality of this. And what we get in the end is instant minus network delays, which is like a millisecond because I'm up there on the same laptop here. We get that instant communication between users. And if I look at the messages that I got, I can see the messages in that format. I did some work here to make this print in binary so I can look at the actual bits. I recommend you do the same thing. Get some similar code in your language to be able to print the bits. Scala, I can convert a byte to a binary string and get the 1s and 0s. It removes the leading zeros, so I have this silly code right here just to get those leading zeros back in, so I have chunks of 8 bits without removing the zeros, and I just print them with the underscores. So I recommend you write some similar code so you can get the data in the format that we've seen in the slides and the format that they show in the spec itself, in the RFC. So you can start seeing these bits. And then you can start feeling like you're in the matrix, which might be a dated reference now. But when you see the ones and zeros, when the guy sees the ones and zeros, he's like, I just see what they actually are. You can start seeing those. We can see the fin bit is 1, the opcode is 001, the mask bit is 1, and then here's our payload length in these 7 bits. Our payload length is not 126 or 127, so we know that that is the entire length. We know that this is going to be our mask, and then our message is all these bits. So if we take our mask, XOR it with these 4 bits, these 4 bits, these 4 bits, these 4 bits, and then XOR this with just the first byte of the mask, bits, I meant bytes, we'll get the entire message out of that. And you could mask, if I had more time, the next thing I would do, take the mask and start demasking those, and you can see that they are ASCII encoded strings. We start decoding that and see what it is. But I'm over time, so we gotta do it. So I'll see everyone, I guess, in the fall. And keep an ear out for communication. I'll send you all the relevant communication.